Discussing today and really getting great perspective on the disastrous border policies of the Biden administration and then Florida's position that we don't want to be facilitating, which are very harmful policies, not only in terms of the rule of law, not only in terms of what drug cartels may be introducing into our country, but also the treatment of people who are basically being trafficked as part of what is effectively the largest human smuggling operation in American history, illegal operation. And so, our perspective is that those are bad policies. If you look at just the absolute explosion of illegal migrants across the southern border, it's unlike anything we've ever seen. Just go back to 2020. It was a much different situation. And we in the state of Florida actually sent support last summer to help Texas and to help interdict. The problem is, you interdict and then you give them to the feds, and then the feds will do things like fly people in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. and drop them off. They will provide, bus, all this other stuff, and then put into different communities. There's no papers, no one knows who the hell a lot of these people are, so it's chaos. But the thing that really stuck out to me were two things. One, I think most people understand this. This is not like Mexicans coming across by and large. These are people from all over the world. I mean, when we were there, we saw people from Africa, the Middle East, South America, you name it. The APB has basically gone out to say, why would you want to go through 3 years of an immigration process? It takes us years to vet. So if we want to bring a doctor in from Nigeria, it takes 3 years or maybe even more. Why would you want to go through that? Just come across the border illegally and you're basically home free. And so just the total breadth of people that were coming from so many different places around the world. I mean, there's actually countries that are closer to Florida or closer to the U.S., but they're going all the way through this roundabout. The other thing that really stuck out was when our folks were interdicting people, they would be asked, where would you like to go? And a lot of them said Florida. Now, I mean, that's true. I mean, you look at where people from failed states in the United States want to go. They want to come to Florida. And I guess people that are fleeing, bad places, not that they're anything that, and we'll talk a little bit more about Pedro Pan and the communists and everything. I mean, they're not qualified as refugees because they just want to be in America for whatever reason. But it was a huge amount. So people, when we sent the folks to help, they were like, well, this is a Texas problem. This is a border. What does that have to do with Florida? It does have to do with Florida, unfortunately. I wish it had nothing to do, but it does. And so that was what we were able to do. Now, we have some folks here who are going to discuss some of the stuff. I just think, there's a lot of bad analogies that get made in modern political discourse, but to equate what's going on with the southern border, with mass trafficking of humans, illegal entry, drugs, all this other stuff, with Operation Pedro Pan, quite frankly, is disgusting. It's wrong. It is not even close to the same thing. We had people that were coming because they were fleeing a communist dictatorship that was persecuting them. Those are not illegal immigrants. These are people that were sanctioned to come by the United States government. And I've talked with Max Alvarez, some of these other people, and said, if Cuba was free in the 1960s, we would have never accepted communist refugees into this country. We were doing it because it was the right thing to do, but it was also consistent with our national interest in fighting communism. And the same reason, and we had a lot of, obviously, involvement in Cuba over the years, same reason why people fleeing the communist regime in Vietnam welcomed into the United States. We had, of course, a lot of involvement there. And so to equate those things with what we're seeing there is just frankly wrong, and it's not something that I think most people that have any sense of what's going on would think that that's something that's good. If you look at the amount of people, you'll hear things about unaccompanied alien children, and that's different than refugees, people that qualify as refugees. These are basically illegal entrants. It's important to point out, though, when they talk about, quote, children, most of these people are what would be considered in most parts of the world military-age males, 15 to 17. I mean, that's who's typically coming across. I think it's CBS News reported 75% of everybody, I think in 2021, was 15 to 17. and the overwhelming majority of those were males. So that's what it is. So I think it's sometimes portrayed as like, these are like, like some baby dropped over the border or something like that. That's just not what's happening. But regardless of that, it is not a good policy to want to incentivize unaccompanied minors to be taking these types of voyages, because there's a huge problem with what human smugglers are doing, human traffickers, sex traffickers, drug cartels. And I can tell you, this is the golden age for the cartels since Biden became president. I mean, they are eating our lunch every single day with what's going on down there. And the sheer increase in what you're seeing is really unbelievable. So just in 2021, I mean, you're looking at about 2 million people coming illegally across the southern border, and really they're not showing any inclination to want to change their policies in a really radical direction. If you look at the amount of fentanyl, and I know Ashley will probably want to talk about this, there's been a fentanyl come across the border. There's been enough to kill like 275 million Americans. And if you look, in 2021, fentanyl was the leading cause of death for Americans between the age of 18 and 45. And so those policies are poisoning this country. You also look at the methamphetamines that are coming across the border. There used to be a lot of that produced in the United States. Not as much anymore. Most of it is coming across the southern border. And so, you deal with that here in South Florida, but I can tell you, you go to other parts of Florida, the percentage of folks who get involved, unfortunately, in meth is way, way too high, particularly in some of our rural counties. That's the #1 scourge that they're fighting. So that's coming across the border in record time. And so, our view is, and then I also think about, if these policies are so great, why are you hiding them at 2 o'clock in the morning? How come you're not being honest? Why aren't you giving the state a heads up about who you're bringing in to the state? How come you're not blaring this from the rafters so that everybody knows how great you're doing? And I think it's because people understand that what's being done is a violation of federal law. Clearly, from a policy perspective, it's having hugely negative consequences, but it's also a failure of the president to fulfill his constitutional oath that the laws be faithfully executed. He is not taking care to do so, and the result is what we're seeing. But I also think to myself, Florida has been very clear. We're not a sanctuary state for illegal immigration. We've made that clear in our laws. We made that clear in our policies. You have other states who have done differently. California, New York, some of those places. And yet they're sending more illegal immigrants to Florida than they are even to California, which is twice our size. And so if this policy is so great, and you have all these sanctuary states that are always virtue signaling, mostly against Trump from 4 years ago, why not then just redirect there? I can tell you, we're getting money from the legislature because we will be redirecting to Delaware and California and these other sanctuary states. That's going to happen in Florida. But until then, we're in a situation where they continue to do this without providing notification, always under the radar, clandestine, and doing it in a way to try to escape any type of public scrutiny. So I'm really glad that we have a great panel here today. We'll have the Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, then we'll go on the horn, and you guys can speak your piece.
Great. Well, good morning. Thank you, Governor, for being here, and of course to Carmen for hosting us here at the museum. And this exhibit tells the stories of so many, 14,000 Cuban refugee children that made that fight, that their parents made the difficult decision. And while neither of my parents came through Operation Pedro Pan, I would like to share just a brief story of how my parents came to be, ultimately changing the trajectory of their lives and mine as well. My father, 25 at the time, had a cousin that worked at the embassy who continuously told him, get your visa. The United States and Cuba are going to break diplomatic relations. My father, he went to the embassy, he got his visa, he encouraged my mom to do the same. She had just had my oldest sister, and they had their first child. And so my mom procrastinated, as you can imagine, and did not get her visa. And then, of course, the relations were broken. My mom often jokes that because she rarely listened to my father, she would always get into trouble, and this is just another example of how that ended up happening. But what I'll tell you is that they had to make the difficult decision. And so my father came ahead in search of democracy, liberty, and freedom, and left behind his wife and infant child. Very difficult to leave behind your family, not knowing when, but if you'll be reunited. And so for those that are here that experience that as children, I can only imagine the difficult nature of having to not only experience it from your perspective, but also from your parents' perspective. And that's why I feel so strongly, and it's incumbent upon all of us to educate those that would like to, as the governor said, conflate one operation that was fully vetted, organized, legal, with a complete and utter chaos at the border. And what you're seeing, the disastrous policies at the border, they are bringing over 2 million migrants from all over the world, not just Central America, all over the world, that are crossing our borders. And those numbers in December were up almost 179,000. Month over month, those numbers increased. And so the president's reckless policies have incentivized this mass influx, which brings, as the governor mentioned, drug trafficking, human trafficking. And I want to thank our Attorney General for being here. This is an issue that she and I have worked on quite a bit, and her leadership on that issue is extremely important, and we appreciate you being here as well. And so for us, again, I think these acts of human trafficking, human smuggling, drug smuggling, they're plain evil. And for the federal government to shirk its responsibility, ignore the laws that this country was founded upon, I believe very strongly that Florida is leading the way under Governor DeSantis' leadership to push back and to make sure that we protect our citizenry, make sure that we are protecting our children. They like to use children as a pawn in this game, but I can tell you, from our perspective, we are protecting children from this heinous scourge that is human trafficking. And so if I could, Governor, I'd just say a few words in Spanish.
Sure.
Le quiero agradecer al gobernador estar aquí con nosotros y también a Carmen. Esta exposición yo tuve la oportunidad de visitar hace unos meses atrás y de verdad que es impactante ver los cuentos de las personas, 14,000 niños que vinieron a este país no sabiendo cuándo o si se iban a reunificar con sus padres. Para mí, yo hice un pequeño momento de informar a las personas qué fue lo que hizo mi papá llegar a este país. Él tenía 25 años, tomó la decisión de recibir su visa. Tenía un primo en la embajada que le había dicho, recibe su visa, voy a buscar su visa, que las relaciones diplomáticas van a parar. Mi mamá no lo pudo recibir a tiempo y él tuvo que tomar la decisión de venir a este país, dejar a su esposa y su bebé, que fue un momento muy difícil para ellos, no sabiendo cuándo se iban a poder reunificar. Pero eso es para muchas personas aquí en nuestra comunidad y en todo el país. Ha sido una historia que todos tenemos muy parecida. Y quiero también agradecerle al gobernador por su política, por su coraje en enfrentar un tema muy importante, porque no es lo mismo una operación como la operación Pedro Pan, con la política desastrosa de Biden en la frontera. Permitir que 2 millones de personas entren a nuestra frontera en el mes de diciembre, 179,000 personas cuyas no sabemos si son criminales, no sabemos si son menores. Muchos de ellos han dicho que son menores y entonces nos enteramos que tienen 25 años. O sea que esto es algo que nos pone en peligro, que es un riesgo para nuestro Estado, es un riesgo para nuestros niños. Y estoy muy agradecida de estar aquí con el gobernador porque él se va a enfrentar a este tema, no va a permitir que nuestros niños sean perjudicados ni que los utilicen en una polémica que la izquierda radical quiere comparar la operación Pedro Pan con lo que es la política desastrosa en la frontera. Y creo que tenemos aquí personas que van a poder hablar de corazón de las diferencias y yo creo que es importante ser honesto en este discurso. Muchas gracias.
Okay, thanks so much. Our Attorney General, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Governor, for your tremendous leadership. Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much. What is important about today is that you have an administration, Governor, and others here that are saying, please pay attention to what's going on right now. It's not just being felt here in Miami, it's all over Florida. We are a pro-legal immigration state. In fact, our state is so prosperous and successful because of the folks sitting around this table. Please do not let anyone say otherwise. Florida welcomes legal immigrants who have made this state what it is. but we are anti-trafficking. We are anti-crime. We are anti-chaos. We are anti-cartel. Make no mistake about it. And let no one tell you that what's being done now is similar to what has been done in the past that has made Miami what it is today in terms of immigration. I will go back just one short year. When Biden first got in office, he immediately stopped doing what presidents have historically done in the past, which is follow public safety immigration laws, both Democrat and Republican. They immediately started telling our sheriffs across the state, if there are those here illegally and they're committing crimes, we are not taking them for deportation, release them back into their communities. This administration, we sued. We then started seeing folks being spread all over the nation that had crossed the border illegally, not vetted, being done in secret. The information has not been shared with the administration. We demanded to know who was coming in the state after we saw someone murdered by someone that was brought in, after we saw cops shot at by people that were here illegally. We need to know how the process is taking place, who is being brought in, how is the vetting being done. No answers. We had to sue our own government, the federal government, to get information about their policies and who they are bringing into the state of Florida. Now, they may be sharing information with other states, but they're not sharing that information with Florida. And then we started learning that not only are there open borders, open chaos, anything goes at the southern border, they are building new programs totally outside of federal immigration laws that allow for those who have crossed here illegally to be released, and then the United States government is helping bring over not just children, don't fall for that, up to 21 years old, people that identify as caretakers, you name it. Your taxpayer dollars have now become a travel agency to help them with illegal immigration programs. We don't know who they're bringing here because they're not telling us. So we have repeatedly had to sue our own government because of not just open borders, but because of illegal programs they are building today. The numbers of those folks that they have brought in and released are astronomical. Florida is already feeling the effects. Do not let anyone convey to you that this is just for humanitarian purposes. They are doing this completely in violation of public safety immigration laws. Biden is ignoring every law that has been put in place by Congresses leading up to today. He has ignored historically what both parties have done in office, and he is endangering American lives. We will continue to push back. I am so proud to stand with a governor who is not afraid to speak out. He does not see a news story or take criticism and back away from what needs to be said to protect Floridians. And we won't back down. And Governor DeSantis, thank you so much for bringing folks together.
And thanks to the AG, we worked together and she led the way on suing the Biden administration over their catch and release policies that are in violation of the law. And we've already gotten them to change some of the policies. So what they had been doing is basically giving people a sheet of paper if they come across illegally and they say, hey, here's this 800 number, just call and set up your own procedure or whatever. I mean, can you imagine if that's how laws were enforced? Like somebody robs your house, the prosecutor says, hey, just call, schedule your burglary trial, whatever you want, go ahead. No, of course people aren't going to do that. And there was no sanction for not showing up. Well, so we called them on it. So now they've had to change to where if someone doesn't show up, they've waived any rights and that they are deportable at that instant. And so we've already made headway. We're working on doing even more. And so I want to thank her for what she's been doing to really help, really fight for safe communities. And she pointed out, you had this guy that murdered a fella in Jacksonville. This person said they were, quote, minor. It was a 24-year-old man, comes in illegally, dumped by Biden into Jacksonville. and then he committed this murder. And so that's bringing problems into our state that it shouldn't be there. So I appreciate that very much. Okay, Max Alvarez, just a great member of this community, very, very strong in understanding the dangers of totalitarianism and communism, and the star of the 2020 convention. So go ahead. Make sure the mic is a little closer, yeah.
Well, number one, thank you very much for coming down and meeting with us.
Yep.
We also want to thank you, as well as the Attorney General, for the work that you're doing. And we want to assure you that we're behind you. There was an article in the paper, I remember February the 3rd. My age, I get confused with the dates. But anyway, this article tried to tell people that our group was against the policies that you're trying to implement in order to make sure that our people are safe. And naturally, when I read that, I'm a little emotional. The first time I want to do things that I'm not supposed to do, but again, you have to understand. But I was also very sad simply because if you can see in this museum what this country, what the Catholic Charities, what Monsignor Walsh, our spiritual father, did for all of us. When we came over here, we thought it was literally temporary until the communist government of Cuba would be finished. Because as you know, in Central and South America, we change governments like we change hats. So I remember my parents thinking, you know, the kids are going to go out because we want to make sure that we don't lose any school time. So really, I was on my way to Spain. I wasn't even coming over here. It just so happens, and I try not to get emotional, but the same day that I left Cuba, on my way to Spain, through Miami, my brother passed away in Spain. So, kind of sad, but at the same time, how fortunate that I end up in this great country of ours. Now let me assure you, they knew exactly who I was. I had a passport. I had a visa. As a matter of fact, I had a visa to go into the seminary at the Marist Brothers in La Coruña, Spain. They knew who my parents were. And I'm so fortunate to end up in the program that Monsignor Walsh was leading. Later on, we find out that he was responsible for more than 14,000 kids. And, you know, it sounds sad, but at the same time, look how fortunate we were. I, as a kid, didn't really know what was happening until later on. But imagine the courage of mom and dad to send a kid somewhere, and I was very fortunate to stay here because the program, whenever you came here, within days or weeks, sometimes months, you were assigned to a foster home or some other place. But Monsignor kept a home, St. Raphael Hall on Biscayne Boulevard on 21st. And since they didn't know whether I was going to go back to Cuba or going to Spain, so they kept me in the program where I stayed for about 4 years until my parents finally came. Now let me tell you what is really sad, that they use this program to try to convince people that this is similar to what is happening today. Not even close. This is the way, and you know, keep using the word socialism, it's communism. This is the way communists work. Remember, the ends justify the means. So they use whatever they can use. They pretend to be whoever they are not, to make sure that they get whatever they want. And here's the problem, because we are a Judeo-Christian society, a Judeo-Christian country. So we not only forgive, but we are the most generous people in the world. We're not allowed to kill, we're not allowed to steal, we're not allowed to lie, then we have to forgive. Communist people don't. If you don't agree with them, they'll kill you. Have no doubt about that. Everybody who's came from any communist country will understand that. So now they're trying to use, illegally by the way, because the Pedro Pan organization It's a non-profit organization, and we are politically colorblind. We are really keeping the mission that Monsignor Brian Walsh started, which is to take care of children. This is not what is happening right now. What is happening right now is they're using children, some of them, like we did, like we were, as merchandise. That's what it is. And these cartels and these drug people, they're using these kids as merchandise for personal gain. And believe me, when we came directly into the hands of the church, in my case, to the hands of Monsignor Brian Walsh, and we were treated like family. I'll tell you right now, Monsignor Walsh is my dad. So don't dare, ever, compare what is happening now. Because what it's trying to do is to destroy you, because you are fighting for us. You're fighting for the state. You're fighting for the children that are coming over here unattended. And that's what they're trying to do. So make sure everybody in this group understands that. Maybe the media does not, but everybody here understands that. Okay? And let me assure you, what they're trying to do is destroy this company. This is nothing about Republicans or Democrats. This is about the land. And my father always said it. He knew, because he had lost Spain, and then he lost Cuba. And he used to tell me, don't lose this place. So thank you, Governor. Thank you for what you're doing. And we're going to die supporting you and anybody who fights to save the only land in the world. Everybody wants to come over here. Nobody wants to leave. Nobody wants to go to California. Everybody wants to come here. What a coincidence. All these people that say if such and such gets elected, I'm going to leave. They haven't left. Nobody in Hollywood left. And I remember listening, if this guy gets elected, we're going to leave. Nobody left. So, again, thank you. By the way, we're so proud, not only of our governor, but we're so very proud of our lieutenant governor. Yes. We're so proud of our attorney general. We are in such great hands in the state of Florida. We have a great speaker of the house. We have a and it's a mistake to have me talk first, because then I yield my time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And obviously very powerful as always. And I mean, you do bring up one good point. I mean, irrespective of the recklessness and the illegality and what the cartels are, all that, but just in terms of people coming into Florida, just think of all the blue state refugees we have. I mean, like literally, this is a big deal. You have people coming to Miami. It's a free country. It's not like we can stop that, but you have a lot of people that are fleeing failed state governments in this country. They're fleeing lockdown policies. They're fleeing high crime to be able to come to a law and order state and a state that respects their freedoms. And so, it's when you're leading the country in net in migration, I mean, there are some benefits to that, but there's also challenges that come with that. And I don't think anyone should think otherwise. Okay, Carmen, thanks so much for hosting us, and floor is yours.
Thank you for coming to see us. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I would like to introduce myself a little bit, chairman of the museum also. And I'm here with members of the Operation Pan. We're here speaking personally and not through the organization, because as Mark said, it's a non-profit, so we stay away from politics, but in a personal sense, we can say whatever we feel, and we are behind you 100%. And that's what we're here to say. Now, to compare Operation Pedro Pan with what is happening now, Operation Pedro Pan was a complete opposite. I was 12 years old when I came with my sister, without my parents, and we had the Catholic Church waiting here for us. And we had Monsignor Walsh. We cannot say enough about him, because Monsignor took the time to study child refugees before us, like especially the Hungarian refugees, and what had gone wrong with those kids. And he made sure to set up a system where we would be well taken care of, and those things that had happened before did not happen to us, which is the opposite of what is happening now, because instead of starting Operation Pan and trying to to learn from that. They're doing the opposite, and so these children are going through terrible ordeals because by the time they get to the United States, they have gone through. Girls are getting raped, and you see a 10-year-old with a baby through no fault of her own, and so to compare it, it's incredible because. We came into the hands of the church. We had documents, which is very important. When people say undocumented, they think, oh, that doesn't mean anything. Oh, it means a lot because our passport said who we were and more importantly, who our parents were. And so none of us got lost. We had powers of attorneys from our parents. Anything that had to do with us, our parents would be consulted in Cuba and they made sure that we kept our religion because 95% of us were Catholic, but we also had 396 Jewish Pedro Pan, and we have about 700 Protestant. And so each of us were put in a group that would take care of our faith, so that because that's what our parents wanted. We basically left Cuba because we would have to become Marxist, and we were people of faith, and so it's so different. And so to put children in the front line, which is what they're doing now, and using them so that they can get their political agenda through, it's inconceivable that these people are doing this. And so we thank you for what you're doing to the state. I was telling the Lieutenant Governor that one day we're going to have to secede if things keep going the way they are. Because when you experience communism, you see what is happening, and you know the steps that are going through, and we see it. We don't see socialism, we see communism coming, and so we see things that the rest of the people don't see, but the state does see them, and so we're very grateful.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Thanks for hosting us. Yes. And don't worry, we're on a mission to make sure we keep Florida free. So, all right, Jerry, do you want to go introduce yourself and talk about some of the work you all have done?
You bet. I'm Jerry Haig. I'm the CEO of One More Child, and Governor DeSantis, we're grateful for you and for Casey, the First Lady, and how child-friendly you have been and how you've promoted the needs and the causes of those that are vulnerable throughout our state, and also the protection of these children. All these conversations have to begin and end with what is best for the child. And that's where we have to be and where we have to make those decisions. Today, regarding children, we have a failed foreign policy that's creating a domestic disaster for children as they're incentivized to become victims and make this trek all the way to the United States. I've seen firsthand the tent cities along the borders and the facilities there. I've seen firsthand the children that are traumatized on those border areas as they've made that trek. In addition to that, we work closely with Attorney General Moody for victims of child sex trafficking. I've seen the faces of children that have been trafficked. As an example, I'll tell you about Sandra. It's not her real name, 15 years old. Sandra was being trafficked for sex. She was from another country. Our staff traveled with Sandra to the deposition to try to bring her perpetrators to justice. That entire court deposition was done in the language of her home country. We failed Sandra by not being able to protect her while she was in the United States from another country. What we've done is we're incentivizing children to become victimized by allowing our borders to remain open for unaccompanied minors in this way. I mean, just imagine it this way. If you have a 10-year-old daughter, and we talked about 75%, probably roughly, are ages 15 and up, but 25%, tens of thousands of these children are under the age of 15. So if you can imagine your 10-year-old daughter, allowing her to travel with someone you've paid that you don't know and you don't trust, and to hitchhike from New York to Miami. It's over 1,000 miles. That's similar to the journey, but in a much more difficult way, of traveling from Honduras to the United States. And so we can no longer incentivize children to be able to make that journey unaccompanied, where they're victimized, they're abused, and they're becoming trafficked. And as we consider that, one of the things that we can do in such a powerful way is help children within their home countries. One More Child in the last 2 years has provided over 1.8 million meals in the country of Guatemala. 77% of all the children that are coming to the United States as unaccompanied minors are coming from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, the Triangle countries. If we can help children there before they make that trek. And so today, Christy and I will be flying out to Guatemala, and tomorrow at the National Palace of Guatemala with President Giammattei, we'll be co-hosting a national anti-child sex trafficking initiative. I know President Giammattei, I've seen his heart, and he deeply cares for the children and the families within his country. But we've got to make sure that we can provide aid for the children in those countries, to be able to make sure that we can keep them safe where they are, and then to secondly promote trade, promote commerce, and promote being able to have great child welfare policies within those countries. What we can't do is we're really pretending by making ourselves feel better that we're helping children when we cannot ensure their safety. Americans have big hearts, and I love that about Americans. We want to help, but in order to help, we have to help in a way that's truly going to help these children. And what that means is we have to ensure there's transparency from the Office of Refugee Resettlement. We have to ensure that national guidelines and policies are followed, and they're not simply suspended when things become difficult, like during COVID, of being able to totally bypass social distancing and occupancy requirements because they're children from another country. It begins and ends with us making decisions about what is best for the children, and we have that responsibility, children from the United States, children from other countries, to ensuring that they are safe, they're cared for, and even beyond that. That's a low bar, right? But just like the people we have in the room today, not only are they safe and they're cared for, but they have the opportunity to thrive.
Thank you. And they mentioned some of the stuff with COVID. They actually will impose more stringent policies on Americans than people coming across the border illegally. It's just unbelievable. But I guess what would you expect? You have a lot of these politicians, they want all these kids forced mask in school, which we don't allow in Florida. And then they'll take pictures of all these poor kids, suffering, and they're just beaming and smiling with no mask on. It's just unbelievable what you're seeing across. But that's the thing. These policies are just about control. They want to do certain things to control the Americans, but then if it doesn't suit them, they let people come in. No requirements of vax, no requirements of any of this other stuff. It just shows you that this is all political. So we've talked about, this is not servicing a lot of these people. A lot of these people are victims, and they're being incentivized to become victims effectively by reckless federal policies. We've talked about how it doesn't follow the rule of law. We've talked about how this is much different than, say, like Operation Pedro Pan. But even putting all that aside, the people from coming all over the world, coming here, and the idea is okay, have we solved all of our problems that our youth need? Have we done that? I seem to think we got a lot of problems that we want to help Americans with. And so, Jack Brewer, I know that's, you've dedicated your life to helping youth. And so, can you just talk about, what are some of the needs of youth that you're dealing with? Do we have all those problems solved yet, or do we still need to help Americans?
Well, we're doing it a lot better here in Florida, Governor, because of you. I want to say that first and foremost, because it's an honor to be here, for God to be able to anoint me to have a voice right now during this spiritual battle that we all see and feel and know that we are in. And I think you make a great point when you look at our country. And I do work all over the world. I feed 5,000 kids a day in Haiti and Africa. So when I saw those Haitians at the border, it broke my heart, because I knew those were my kids too. But poverty is not persecution, and lawlessness is not godly. So just like my brother, Mr. Haig, just said, we have to help people where they are, to incentivize a few that are able-bodied enough to be able to get to the border and get across the border and use millions and hundreds of millions and even billions of dollars to do so, when we could go into those countries and actually establish programs and give people an opportunity and a chance. That's what the Word of God told us to do. That's what Christ told us to do. Preach the gospel to every nation, not sit in your own nation and create this bubble. We do that. And Florida is a catalyst for that, a catalyst for opportunity, no matter if you're talking about the Caribbean countries, the Central American countries. But right here in this country, we have an issue that we better all start to recognize, and that's called fatherlessness. We have more fatherless homes per capita in the United States of America than anywhere in the world. I face it every day, right here in Broward County, where I live. I take on these kids, they have no fatherly influence. These cell phones are raising them. This TikTok is just warping their mind. I got little girls just last week, 10, 11 years old, sending naked pictures to each other. I got boys selling drugs at 11 and 12 years old in our schools. Parents don't know what's happening because they don't understand, and the dads are not in their lives. And so, Mr. Governor, I applaud you for taking care of the kids here. Because if we don't do something, we're going to lose our country. We're going to lose the country that we know that we have right now. Our reading and math proficiency levels mirror third world countries right now in a lot of our inner city areas. It is sick. 71% of every kid that drops out of high school is fatherless. Think about that. You're 20 times more likely to go to prison if you're fatherless. I teach in the prisons every week, and I'm teaching a bunch of fatherless men who came from fatherless homes who now have fatherless kids. So let's think about that, and let's pay attention to these issues and understand that feeling good about your charity is not enough. You have to be smart. You have to plan. You have to understand how we deliver our aid, whether it's foreign or domestic. And so together we can do a lot, but we got to serve one another as brothers and sisters. And we talk about these kids coming over here. We have to first start as Americans serving each other. Forgetting about the skin color, not letting them divide us because of this color and that color. That conversation needs to end. We need to remove the color box from all of our government agencies. Governor, I wish you'd do that. We're Floridians. We're Americans. We don't care if you're black, white, green, purple, or brown. We're going to mark down that we're Americans. We're going to have each other's back, and we're going to continue to pray over each other in this great land that God gave us. And if you don't mind, I'm going to say a real quick prayer for this governor, his entire office. Because right now what he's fighting forces from all over this country and the world right now. And we all know that, and we see that, and that's what this is about. It's about spirituality. So if you don't mind bowing your heads really quick. And Heavenly Father, I just ask for your hedge of protection over Governor DeSantis, his family, and all the warfare that comes at him, dear God. We know what he's facing. We know that he's about righteousness, dear God. He's rooted in you, Father God. He believes in you. Through your strength, he'll continue to lead not just Florida, but this nation, and continue to be an example of the light. Florida is the light for so many across the world, dear God, and we thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thanks, Jack. And I just want you to know what said we're on it. I mean, you know, one of the reasons we're opposing CRT in schools, we want all the kids treated as individuals. We want them judged on their content of their character, on their talents. We don't want them separated into racial groups and pitted against each other. Every single kid is a Floridian and American, and that's what we want to make sure. And we've got to stop dividing people, and we've got to stop teaching our kids to hate our country. And so that's our mission, and we're going to make sure we get that done this legislative session. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming. And look, at the end of the day, Biden's border policies mean more human trafficking, more sex trafficking, and more drug trafficking. If you did the policies that the Trump administration had and the policies that Florida is supporting, we would have less human trafficking, less sex trafficking, and of course, less drug trafficking. And so that would be better for the victims that are coming through with the cartels. It would also be better for the victims in our own country who are having to deal with drugs in their communities like we've never seen. And unfortunately, victims like we saw in Jacksonville of people who have been trafficked and then have committed crimes in the United States. And so let's get this right. It's important to follow the rule of law. It's important to make sure that we have orderly process and the Constitution's being followed. And it's important that we do everything we can to protect the people of this state of Florida, and we're going to continue to do that. So I appreciate everyone being here, and we're happy to take a few questions. So, Governor, go ahead.
Governor, hi. I just wanted to ask you, we've asked the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to tell us if there have been any criminal charges filed related to the planes that you've identified that were coming to the state. I understand that the FDLE also has not been able to identify the immigration status of the people on those planes. Can you just talk to, when you talk about national crimes committed by the people coming into the state, what are you referring to?
Well, okay, so there's a couple different things. I mean, so you have the transport in and what penalties would attach to, say, a contractor who's facilitating illegal migration. We are working with the legislature right now to be able to implement in statute policies that would effectively bar them from being able to do business with the state of Florida or local jurisdictions, as well as charging restitution for everybody they're bringing in. Because you bring somebody in, there's all kinds of costs, education, healthcare, unfortunately criminal justice, all these different things that go into it. One of my predecessors, Governor Childs, he sent the federal government a bill when they were dumping people illegally into Florida back in the 90s, and so we're looking to kind of mimic that. And so we're going to need that to do. Now, what they have done is there have been people being brought in like vans who get stopped. They are charging the drivers with being involved in human smuggling. Now, the people that are illegal, those are folks that, of course, once we have the funding, we will reroute to Delaware or these other places. But in terms of a contractor who's hired by the federal government to fly someone in at 2 in the morning, we, of course, are fighting to be able to have laws in place that will be able to deter that. And I think that's just the nature of what we're doing. The people that are coming at 2 in the morning, I can tell you, they're not here lawfully. I mean, you saw what happened in Jacksonville. You've seen in some of these other instances. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. And first of all, if someone comes legally, the federal government's not flying them all over the country. That's not how it works. I mean, if you come over on a visa, you go where you can, but you got to pay your own way and all that. They actually get treated better in many respects than people who are coming legally, which is really incredible. But I think what we're trying to do in the legislature is going to be very important. I think we've got good support for it. And if you do that, if the contractors are on the hook for the restitution, which they should be on the hook for because they're imposing costs on us, I think it's going to deter it. I mean, I think they're going to look and they're going to say, okay, better to do California, better to do New York, better to do those other places, because honestly, they have sanctuary policies in place. They view it as positive. And understand, what New York does is now they're saying, not just illegal aliens, but any foreigner can vote in New York City. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, that's crazy. And so we're not going to let that happen in Florida.
If I could ask a different topic.
Does anyone else have anything on this? Javi, do you want to do that? I'll get back to you, but go ahead.
You're open to going after some of the hotels that are housing on these.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
What about the NGOs that are funding it?
Well, I think what we're working on is anybody who's facilitating this, could potentially face the restitution, and they could potentially face now a profit generating enterprise is easier to hold accountable on the business side because they want access to Florida's market. NGOs, it's a little bit different, but at a minimum, they would be liable potentially for the restitution, and they should be, and I think that that's totally appropriate. We are watching different things. I know you had asked about there was an issue with some folks in Maitland. Well, it turns out those are folks that had H-2A visas, and so they were brought in through the normal course. So a contractor would not be liable, if they're bringing people in who have visas. But if you're bringing people from the border who are here illegally and you're facilitating that into Florida, well, you're imposing a lot of costs on our communities, and so we want to make sure that we're sending you the bill for that.
Did your administration verify they were legal immigrants?
We verified they were H-2A holders, yep. Okay. Go ahead. Mark, go ahead.
I want to ask you, where do you fall on the divide between Pence and Trump? Who's right over?
I'm not... I've had a great relationship working for actually was governor for 2 years with the Trump administration. I can tell you that we got a hell of a lot more done when Donald Trump was president than now. In fact, I mean, if I needed help, I could call the president. He would want to help us out. Now it's like, whatever I want to do, they will do the opposite. So it's almost like I tell people, I'm like, okay, if you want me to do something, I'll just take the opposite position, and then maybe they'll end up doing it. So, yes, sir.
Governor, my name is Julio Martinez, the former mayor of the city of Hialeah. I've lived in Hialeah 60 years, and I was the first one to introduce you before you ran for governor, and I want to tell you that in the 60 years that I've lived here in Hialeah, you are the best governor we've ever had.
Oh, thank you.
Local 10 News, two-pronged question on two different issues. So I'll give it to you both. One is about taking of education in schools. It's that AG 1557, where it talks about how, I guess, school districts will be encouraged to be prohibited from discussing sexual orientation or gender identity in the classroom. Second prong, our colleague at Local 10, Glenna Milberg, did an investigation where she found that here in Miami-Dade, several senior citizens that were lifetime Democrats told her that some third-party folks showed up, and the next thing they knew, they got new voter registration cards with Republican on there, with whether they could grant permission. Miami-Dade County State Attorney just launched an investigation. We'd also look at that on that.
Well, we're pursuing the strongest election integrity measures. We've already done the strongest in the country with banning ballot harvesting, banning Zuckerbucks, making sure that you have identification if you're requesting an absentee ballot. But what we're also trying to do this legislative session is say, we're going to make ballot harvesting even more penalized, because I think that's become a cottage industry, and it really undermines the integrity of the process. But I think that in terms of what we're doing with this election integrity unit, where we're going to have a specified group of investigators and law enforcement that will go after those types of election shenanigans. And now, yes, some local jurisdictions will do it. The problem is, you got a lot of irons in the fire, so some don't really pay a lot of attention to any election infractions. But anything trying to violate election law is something that I think needs to be taken seriously. So if we have this investigative unit, if someone's ballot harvesting, you have people that know the law backwards and forwards. They can do. We're going to try to have it all referred to the statewide prosecutor under AG Moody's office, so it doesn't even matter which jurisdiction. And many of these groups span county boundaries and all this other stuff. So I think it's really, really significant in terms of what we're trying to do, and that would apply across the board. I mean, it doesn't matter which group is doing it. If they're changing to Republican and that's illicit, they need to be held accountable. If they're doing the opposite, they need to be held accountable. We also want to make sure we have clean voter rolls. With Florida, you have people, most people come, but people, it's a transient type of thing, and we do find people that vote in two different states, and so we want to make sure those rolls are clear. We certainly do not want non-citizens on the voting rolls, but we've seen that happen where they're trying to do that. And so our Constitution says very clearly that we are not you're not allowed to vote in state or federal elections in Florida if you're not a U.S. citizen. I mean, that should just be a basic thing, and it's part of our state constitution. But you see what's happening in New York. I guarantee you they're probably doing that in San Francisco, letting foreigners vote. And it's going to end up going in these blue jurisdictions, and then they're going to try to take that nationwide. And so Florida, we're not going to let that happen. I mean, just think of how ridiculous. I mean, it's a slap in the face to citizens to have your vote diluted by somebody that's not even a citizen of your country, much less of your state. It's unacceptable, and so we're not going to allow that to happen. In terms of the schools, we've seen instances of students being told by different folks in school, don't worry, don't pick your gender yet, do all this other stuff. They won't tell the parents about these discussions that are happening. That is entirely inappropriate. And schools need to be teaching kids to read, to write. They need to teach them science, history. We need more civics, understanding the U.S. Constitution and what makes our country unique. All those basic stuff to get into situations where you're not having the parent, you're hiding things from the parent, you're injecting these concepts about choosing your gender, that is just inappropriate for our schools. And so I don't support that going on. I don't think it's going on in large numbers, but I'll tell you, since this debate has started, people have reported to me, that this has happened in areas that you would not expect it, to happen. And so we want to make sure that our schools are really focusing on the basics. We don't want them to be engines to be putting things like the CRT that we've talked about, things that are divisive and are not accurate, of course, when you start talking about some of the stuff that they're teaching with it, and making sure we're really focusing on the basics. But the larger issue with all of this is parents must have a seat at the table when it comes to what's going on in their schools. And unfortunately, you have different people, you have unions, the same unions that sued me to try to close our schools in 2020, they don't want to have parents have access to the curriculum in some respects. You have politicians saying parents have no role in the education of their kids. Give me a break. And so in Florida, we're really working on transparency legislation. We want parents to be able to have access to what's going on in the classroom. And certainly, it is inappropriate to be hiding these things from parents. They not only do they deserve a seat at the table, I don't think you can have an effective school system unless they have a seat at the table. So thank you, everybody. We'll see you later. Thank you.